Mrs. Okada, 30 minutes after confessing, began to vomit blood and cough profusely, after which she eventually died. This is a tragic story of Zara and Kuti's love, which had seemed perfect at first. A tale of young love that blossomed during university and grew stronger as they began their careers. After over 5 years together, Zara, who came from a close-knit religious family, had finally told her parents about her desire to marry Kuti. The news had brought a mix of excitement and tension to her home. Her father, Mr. Smith, had always doted on his only daughter and wanted nothing more than to see her happy. But her mother, Sharon, had hesitations. The day of the introduction came, and Kuti made all the necessary arrangements with his people, and together they set out to the Smith residence. From the moment Kuti walked into their home for the first meeting, Sharon, Zara's mother, felt an inexplicable unease. During that first introduction, Sharon had excused herself visibly uncomfortable. She went into the room and was immediately followed by Zara, who sensed her mother's discomfort. Sharon warned Zara afterward that something about Kuti did not feel right. She could not explain it, but her intuition was really wrong. She urged her daughter to reconsider, pleading with her not to rush into a marriage that felt strange and suspicious. She told her that she was still young and that other men would come to ask for her hand. But Zara, headstrong and deeply in love, brushed off her mother's warnings. She had known Kuti for years. She could not believe that her mother's intuition alone could be grounds to abandon her relationship. After months of Zara's insistence, Mr. Smith, who could never say no to his daughter, reluctantly agreed to the union, hoping his wife's feelings were unfounded. But Sharon's apprehension remained, casting a subtle shadow over what should have been a joyous celebration. 6 months after, in a very elaborate ceremony, Zara and Kuti got married. During the event, Kuti's mother gifted them a very expensive mirror which she instructed Kuti to place in their bedroom so that it does not get damaged by visitors. In the first year of marriage, Zara and Kuti's life seemed full of promise. They settled into a comfortable routine, balancing their demanding job and dreaming of a family. When Zara discovered she was pregnant, her heart overflowed with joy. She eagerly shared the news with her mother, who, despite her doubts, celebrated and prayed fervently for her daughter's safe delivery. However, when Zara shared the news with Kuti's mother, the response was certainly cold. Zara had expected a congratulatory warmth, perhaps even excitement at the thought of a grandchild, but instead, Kuti's mother gave a lukewarm response. Hurt and confused, Zara mentioned it to Kuti, who quickly brushed it off, suggesting she was reading too much into it. But the brief exchange left a lingering feeling of unease in Zara's heart. As the months passed, Zara prepared eagerly for the birth of her child, envisioning a future filled with family and love. But at 8.5 months before she went into labor, tragedy had struck one night when Kuti's mother snuck into their bedroom through the mirror and killed the baby inside Zara. At 9 months, when her water broke, she was taken to the hospital where she was in labor for hours on ending. After hours of intense pain, she gave birth to a stillborn son. The pain of that loss was indescribable. Zara's heart shattered as she held her lifeless baby, her dreams of motherhood slipping away. Kuti tried to console her, whispering that they would have more children, that this was just a setback. But Zara's grief was overwhelming, and a dark sadness settled over her. 8 months later, Zara became pregnant again. She and Kuti chose to keep the news to themselves, hoping to shield themselves from any negativity. However, Kuti shared the news with his mother, who only responded indifferently. Sadly, this pregnancy ended in a miscarriage because, like the previous time, Kuti's mother had come at the dead of the night through the mirror to kill the baby before it was formed. Zara felt her spirit break further. She could not understand why her body seemed to betray her, why she could not carry a child and deliver like every woman. When Kuti's mother called, she offered Zara only a brief dismissive reassurance. These things happen. As time went on, the couple faced marital strain. Kuti remained dutiful, but his own personality, which had always been bent towards his mother, began to subtly shift. He became less supportive, less understanding of Zara's grief. His mother's influence seemed to seep into their relationship, and Zara often felt isolated, bearing her sorrow alone. The lack of warmth and sympathy from Kuti's mother only added to her sense of unease, though she could not put her finger on why. When Zara fell pregnant a third time, she could hardly bring herself to feel joy, fearing another loss. She kept the news secret from everyone, including Kuti. She prayed fervently, holding on to hope despite her fears. But as she reached the 5-month mark, strange things began to happen. Zara felt unusually weak and feverish, plagued by nightmares she could not explain, shadows of fear that loomed over her even in daylight. One evening, while she lay awake beside Kuti, her mind troubled, she overheard a phone conversation he had with his mother. Though Kuti's voice was low, she could make out certain words, phrases that chilled her to the bone. "Yes, mother, I understand. It must be done this time." His words were laden with a strange heaviness that made her shiver, but she had not told Kuti yet that she was pregnant. Feeling increasingly unsettled, Zara confided in her mother Sharon, who immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. Sharon, trusting her own intuition, urged Zara to seek spiritual counsel. She connected Zara with a trusted elder from her church who was known for his ability to see visions. Zara, exhausted and desperate, agreed to meet with him. In the days that followed, the elder met with Zara and prayed over her. His face turned grave as he sensed an unseen force around her, a darkness linked not only to her recent losses, but to someone close to her. "There is something here," he said gently. "Something or someone does not wish for you to have a child." The elder began a series of prayers and fasts, with Zara seeking answers. After a week, he revealed a difficult truth. Kuti's mother had been involved in her continuous miscarriages. He told her that she should spend the next few months with her mother instead of going back home. She called Kuti and told him about her decision to stay at her parents' house for a while. Kuti immediately called his mother, who was furious. She told him that it had been Zara's mother who was responsible for Zara not being able to carry their child to term, and that he should order her to come back home. Zara refused, saying that she was not comfortable staying there. She told him that she wanted to stay with her family for a while before she would return back home. Kuti's mother, on hearing this, began to panic. On hearing this, Kuti's mother immediately ran to see Miss Agnes. Miss Agnes was her spiritual mother, who had helped her to conceive Kuti when it was discovered that she was barren. She explained to her that her daughter-in-law Zara had refused to come back home and that she suspects she is pregnant again, as that was the only reason why. Miss Agnes reminded her about the condition given by the oracle for her to conceive years ago. "I have already helped you enough," she said. "I gave you the mirror to aid you in ensuring Zara would never bear children." She proceeded to tell her to better return it in one piece, or else she was going to pay the consequences. A couple of months later, with the help of her mother's prayers and the elder in their church, they were able to withstand all the spiritual attacks sent their way. It started to become clear that the attack was from someone close, but the efforts were all for nothing, as Zara finally gave birth prematurely at 7 months. Sharon had called Kuti to inform him of the birth of his daughter, but told him to come alone, that they had returned from the hospital. As soon as the child was born, Miss Okada began to become very sick. It felt like she was dying slowly. Just then, she immediately called Kuti to tell him that she was not feeling too good. Kuti, like a good son, told her that he was coming to see her tomorrow after he got back from work. But this time, he did not tell her about Zara giving birth. He wanted to surprise his mother, hoping that the sight of his newborn daughter would make his mother feel better. The following day, together with his wife, new baby, and her mother Sharon, they went to see his mother, bringing along with them some groceries and medication for Miss Okada. Miss Okada was bedridden for a week now since the birth of the child. She had called Miss Agnes, who told her that the worst had happened. On hearing this, she called Kuti and asked about Zara. But at that moment, Kuti told her he was just arriving at her house and that he brought a surprise. At that moment, she instructed the people in the house not to let them in. As Kuti came out with his family to enter the house, a maid informed him that his mother was sleeping and that she did not want to be disturbed. He brushed the person aside and made his way into his mother's room holding the child. As soon as he entered the room and his mother set her eyes on the child, she began to laugh uncontrollably. This later turned to high-pitched screams. Everyone was confused, but she began to speak, saying, "Kuti, you have killed me. How can you do this to me after everything I have done for you?" Kuti, confused, began to ask her what he had done. Kuti's questions served as a trigger and Miss Okada began to confess. She told them that 3 years after she got married, she discovered that she could not bear children. Her husband would have felt that she knew and trapped him. She was well aware of the fact that his people would marry another woman for him, so as to continue his lineage. To prevent this, she turned to Miss Agnes. Miss Agnes consulted the oracle, who made it possible for her to conceive, but on the condition that she was not going to see her grandchild, or else she was going to die. On hearing this, Sharon turned and looked at her daughter Zara. She felt justified for her initial suspicion about Kuti. 30 minutes after confessing, Miss Okada began to vomit and eventually she died. The revelation left Zara reeling, but it also opened her eyes. She remembered the coldness, the dismissive words, the strange aura her mother had sensed long ago. Her world shattered as she grappled with the reality that her husband's own mother were responsible for her suffering. When Zara looked at Kuti, he was visibly shaken. His loyalty to his mother had blinded him, and though he had not been involved directly, he had been complicit in allowing his mother's influence to control their lives. I thought it was what she wanted, he whispered, guilt lining his face. I didn't know. I would have protected us more, Zara. Years later, Zara looked back on her time with Kuti's mother as a distant memory, a painful lesson in trusting her instincts and listening to the wisdom of those who loved her most. She found peace in her own journey, knowing that she had emerged stronger, her heart resilient and her faith unshaken. And though the dreams of her past had faded, new dreams blossomed, ones built on trust, light, and on an unbreakable spirit.